Okay, at this point in the assignment career prospects for sociology and CJ majors, you should have a subset of the data, and the subset of the data should be in its own data table, like this. You can see I've called it subset. Doesn't really matter what you call it as long as you remember the name if you need it. And so in the rest of the assignment, what we're going to do is use pivot table, which is a very powerful feature in Excel, to look at a variety of things. We're going to look at the average income of sociology majors. We're going to filter out those sociology majors who aren't working, look at their income. We're going to then look at income distribution. We're going to look at occupational distribution. All of this can be done very quickly and fairly easily once you get the hang of it with the pivot table. To get to a pivot table, there's a number of ways to do it. In the Table Tools menu, you can click on Summarize with Pivot Table. Then Create Pivot Table, press OK. Excel creates a new worksheet. There's this template pivot table on the left. And on the right, there's something called the Pivot Table Field List. It should list all your variables. Over here, the 14 variables. And it has 4 boxes underneath. Each of these boxes is going to come in very handy. The report filter box, or the filter box right here, is where you put variables if you want to subset the data set. You want to look at people with just certain characteristics. Column and row boxes are if you want a variable to be in a certain row or column. The values box is these are the variables that you want actually computed. So if you're looking at an average or a count or sum of some variable, that variable is going to go in the values box. And if you're looking at an average of, say, income by gender, you could put the sex variable in the row labels and the income variable in the values box. Then if you wanted income by education, you could put education in the rows and income in the values box. So it's very versatile, and there's all kinds of combinations you can look at. What we want to do is, because we're interested in occupations, we want to look at only people who worked last year, and we also want to look at only sociology majors. That's what we're interested in right now. We'll get to the criminal justice in a moment. So in order to filter out everybody who's not a sociology major, I grab the field of degree variable, drop it in the filter box. Then I come over here and click on this drop-down menu. All of these are selected right now. I can click Select Multiple Items. And I can come up to the top here and uncheck the All box. Now nobody's selected, and I can come down and choose Sociology, press OK. Now only sociology majors are going to be in the analysis we do here. That can be easily changed once you're doing criminal justice. That's part of the power of the pivot table. Once you've made one decision, you can easily change it if you want to. Then we're only interested in workers who actually worked last year. So I grab the worked last year variable, drop it in the report filter, and then click on the drop-down menu, select multiple items, uncheck all, and check yes only. Press OK. Now, if I want any statistic with income, which is really, this is what we're interested in. We're interested in wage and salary income, not total personal income. Total personal income includes investment income. We're interested in what they made on the job. So I drag and drop wage and salary income to the values box. The default statistic is sum, but I want the average. Sum doesn't mean anything. Here, I can right click on the number in the table and check Summarize Values by Average. And now it's giving me an average of $61,785.90. I can click on the Home menu and put this in dollar format, like that. Now, you have to remember some people only worked part of the time last year for whatever reason. Maybe they were sick, maybe they were unemployed. So this figure is going to be affected by that. Say we're interested in people who really worked most of the year. We can look at this variable weeks worked last year. People reported how much they worked. And grab that and drop it in the report filter. In this case, I'm going to filter out people who didn't work more than 40 or more hours. So I'm going to only look at people who worked, 40 weeks, 40 or more weeks last year. That's okay, like that. Now the average income goes up to $67,275. Just for an exercise, not per the assignment, of course, you could look at people who only worked 48 or more weeks a year, who worked basically a full year. The income's going to go up even more, like that. And see how which data you're using is, of course, going to influence what number you get. So we get a $67,275.38 average income for sociology majors who worked at least 40 weeks last year. Now, say I'm also interested in what kinds of occupations sociology majors tend to get. So, no longer interested in income. I can grab income from the values box, drag it outside the field list, and it disappears. It's gone. But the filtering stays in. So I'm interested in what kinds of occupations sociology majors are engaged in. And for this, I need a frequency distribution. Simple frequency distribution tells you the number of people or cases in each category. To create a frequency distribution, it's simple. It's only one variable you're interested in this case, occupation. I drag and drop occupation to the row labels, then I grab it again and drop it in the values box. And then here we have basically frequency distribution. That dollar formatting has remained. I can get rid of that by highlighting B and changing it to number. Then I can get rid of the decimal points. So this tells me that 3 of these sociology majors, people who majored in sociology, were accountants and auditors. Now, these are a lot of different jobs, all the different jobs that sociology majors engage in. I'm really interested in the most common or modal occupation. So what I want to do is sort this list by count. So I click anywhere here, just one cell, right click, sort, largest to smallest, like that. And now it's showing me that the modal occupation, the most common, is social worker, followed by managers, administrators, NEC, which is not otherwise specified, primary school teachers, etc. You can also scroll down to the bottom of this table and see that there's 260 sociology majors in this particular sample. Now, earlier I looked at the average income. It's about $67,000. But I'm interested in the whole distribution of income. What does that look like for sociology majors? I can do that by simply doing a frequency distribution on income rather than on occupation. And in order to do that, I can just grab occupation out of the row labels, drag it over here outside the field list, and it disappears. Drag it out of the values box, it disappears. Now I'm going to do the same thing with income. I'm looking at wage and salary income rather than total income because I'm interested in how much they make on the job. Drag income to the row labels, grab it and drag it to the values. And now note that this statistic is sum, which is really not what we want. If we go back, I'm just going to press undo. For frequency distribution, we're looking at counts. So if I go forward, we want to change this to counts. That's easy to do. I click anywhere on the table, well, anywhere in this column anyway. Summarize values by count. Because a frequency distribution gives you the count or the frequency of each value in the distribution. Now, this is pretty unwieldy. What we really want is something condensed. Here we have income, which is an interval level variable. There's a lot of different incomes. Most people don't make exactly the same as someone else. So we want to condense these incomes. I can click on any of the individual incomes over here, right click and group, and already it puts in the minimum and maximum. Now that maximum is actually not the actual maximum, in the sense that the American Community Survey is part of the census, and the census works hard to protect people's privacy. When you get millionaires or people making more than, just making a lot of money, if those people end up being in the census or in the American Community Survey, they could be identified possibly by their incomes, given that they're so rare. And so what they do is they do something called top coding, which is adjusting down the incomes of people above a certain level, and these data are top coded at 475. So actually the top income is not 475, something higher. We're going to want to go in $5,000 increments like that. That condenses the data and makes it a lot easier to read. Of course, I could experiment and look in increments of $10,000 like that. But I'm going to leave it in increments of $5,000 for now. This says that 16 people had incomes between $0 and $4,999, 4 people at $10,000, $14,999, etc. Remember, this is a survey, so if somebody's working full-time and making less than $5,000 with a college degree, is that possible? Well, it could also just be a mistake. Certainly mistakes happen, and there's certainly a lot more than 16 of them, so it's possible that these are just errors. But in any event, this gives us a sense of how much money people are making who major in sociology and live in New Jersey. But picture is worth a lot more than a bunch of numbers in many cases, so we want to create a histogram out of this frequency distribution. Histogram is just the bar chart equivalent of frequency distribution. And it's easy to create that by clicking on pivot table tools. Note that if I'm clicking outside of this table, pivot table tools goes away. I click back inside the pivot table, tools comes back. I can click on it, click on pivot chart, and for histogram I choose the simplest column chart. Press OK. Now it gives me this little chart here. This little histogram chart version of this. I want this to be bigger so you can see it. I right click on it, move it to its own sheet. I'm going to call it histogram income for social majors. Now the table's a bit bigger so we can read it, or I should say the chart rather, but it lacks identifying information, so we're going to change that here. Put a title. Title should be very descriptive. The goal here is to make the chart as self-explanatory as possible. And I might then, it's also important to put the source. I'll adjust accordingly. I can get rid of this legend because that doesn't tell me anything. And now I have a decent chart here. I can also label this on the side here. I'm going to layout, axis titles, primary vertical axis. Put a title here, call it number of people, number of respondents. And the last thing you want to do is to interpret it. In other words, what is the shape of this distribution? And we would say it was skewed to the right because there's a long right tail, and this is typical of income distributions because you have a small number of people making a lot of money.